All right, thank you very much. Thanks everybody for joining us. We have quorum. Thank you for attending this rather unusual AGM. Thanks for also being here to help us celebrate the Chamber's 2019 successes before the next year was too far gone. The time now seems to travel both slower and faster speeds simultaneously, and I don't know how the pandemic does that, but it seems to be a physical thing. The Nanaimo Chamber wanted to find time to take a break in all of our preparations, our reparations, our lockdowns and restarts to remind ourselves what our business community and the Chamber have been up to for the past year. I wanted to let the community know also that we mostly seem to be well positioned and entrepreneurially spirited enough to face even the most uncertain future. Before we call the meeting to complete order, I wish to acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including Nanaimo, Suminis, and Snonas. We do have a quorum of 30 members in good standing. In fact, we are in excess of that number, but we would normally sit down with 50 to 75 to 100 members in attendance, but without a buffet, I guess we're just not that good of a draw. You should have received an annual report by email. If there's technical problems with that, please go to the Chamber link that was sent to you this morning, and you'll be able to link to a working copy of that. We'll be employing Robert's Rules of Order, as well as our own policies, procedures, and bylaws to govern my moderation. Movers and seconders have agreed to be identified in advance for efficiency since the annual report was made public yesterday. Once motions are seconded, they're open for discussion. If you have a question or wish to have a discussion relative to a motion, please enter it into the chat box you see at the bottom of your screen. I will moderate those questions, answer them, or direct them to a speaker. Once a motion is on the floor and seconded and discussions have been concluded, I'll call the vote and a polling questionnaire will appear on your screen. So any questions so far? And there again, use the chat and I can respond to you. I see no questions, so I'm going to ask for our first motion, and that is a motion to adopt the agenda that has been moved by Joanna Heskett and seconded by Nathan Seward. Any discussion on adopting the agenda? I'll ask a second time. Any discussion on adopting the agenda? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. So simply click if you support or oppose adoption of the agenda. Give you a few seconds for everybody to get familiar with how to vote. When we have a full vote, Marika will reveal the results. If we needed to call a close of the vote, consider this done. And can you reveal the results? Pretty good. 100% in support of adopting the agenda. Motion is adopted and approved and passed. Our second motion is to approve minutes from the 129th AGM. It was moved by Corey Hostetter and seconded by Graham Morey. Do we have any discussion? Seeing no discussion, I'll call the vote. Please vote now. And I'll close the vote now. Excellent. 100% to support approving the minutes from the 129th AGM. I'll now introduce our chair and the chair's report from Shauna McPhillips. Shauna, take it away.
Thanks so much, Cam. Wow, it's hard to believe it's been a year since I was appointed as chair for the Chamber. 2019 was a really successful year for the Chamber. We hosted many events. Our most notable, of course, was the Commercial Street Market, where we had thousands of visitors join us in the downtown core. This, of course, was a huge asset and win for many, many businesses. But not only that, was something that citizens in Nanaimo could be super proud of, something to call their own. Many other successful events throughout the year and other achievements. However, I'm going to speak specifically to some of the work the board did in collaboration with both Kim and our staff. And so in 2019, we created a brand new 3-year strategic plan. We did that, and like all strategic plans, we had key result areas that were the core of our focus and time and energy in 2019, and we were certainly very successful with that. But what I will say is, little did we know in creating this plan, it would create a solid foundation to really lead us into 2020, which is a year that we've had to completely reinvent our operations and how we do business. Like many other businesses, not only in Nanaimo, but across the world. And I'm sure many of you have seen the results of some of the changes we've already made this year. And Kim's going to speak a little bit more towards that. But what I can say is that our plan will not only help us survive in 2020, but it'll help us thrive. So that concludes my chair report for 2019.
Thank you, Shauna. Seeking a motion to adopt the chair's report. The motion is moved by Shauna McPhillips and seconded by Graham Morey. Is there any discussion on the chair's report? Enter it in the chat box if you have questions or discussion on the vote and motion. Seeing not a shadow of anything coming in there, I will ask, or I will call the vote. So please vote. I'll give everybody about 15 seconds to exercise your vote here. Time is up and the vote is closed. 100% in favor of adopting the chair's report. And we'll go on to the next motion. If we could close the poll, please, Marika. As is our custom and following our bylaws and policies and procedures, we're now going to move to dissolve the 2019 Board of Directors. This is moved by Dirk Heidemann and seconded by Judy Steffen. Both of those are ambassadors and, of course, members. So I will call the vote. There's your vote. I will give you 15 seconds. Time is up. Please close the poll. And 100% are in favor of dissolving the Board of Directors. Now I'd like to introduce the incoming Board of Directors. We have a range of numbers on our board to make our board effective, and we had no new nominations come in during this nominating period. We have the correct amount, can exercise our quorum at the board table. So I'll just run through the list and thank each one of these people very much for putting their names forward and for tirelessly attending the board meetings and sitting on committees and helping out. There's Shauna McPhillips, of course, Dan Kachirka, Greg Phillips, Meryl Chaley, Graham Morey, Carrie Chassels, Erilyn Thomas, Travis Wilson, Corey Hostetter, William Litchfield, Chris Beaton, Joanna Hesketh, and Nathan Seward. So if we could move to the next slide. A motion again, sorry. This was moved by Jessica Thatcher, and she is an ambassador, and Dirk Heidemann seconded. So I'll call the vote. You have 15 seconds to exercise your vote. Time is up to approve the Board of Directors by acclamation. 100%, as you can see there. Thank you very much. So welcome new board members. I would now like to introduce our treasurer, Meryl Chaley, and ask her to deliver her treasurer's report. Go ahead, Meryl.
Great. Thanks, Kim, for the introduction, and welcome everybody. I believe this is like my third year as treasurer, and I've experienced lots of fiscal challenges and fiscal successes. And I think I would sum up this year as being doing more with less. So you've had a peek of my treasury report and the financials. You'll see that our revenues are up and our costs are down. So specifically, our revenues went up about 7,500. Our wages and contractors went down 15,000. So it resulted in operating surplus of about just over $21,000 for 2019 before capital items, which is a good $20,000 improvement over last year. So 2019 has been a great success, and I just want to thank Kim and his staff for all their efforts. You always see in my treasurer's report, I've also included some stats just on the number of events, people membership attended, and communications. And that's what's resulted in our continuing revenue climb. And without the community support and our members, we couldn't have accomplished that. So thank you to our members for all your continued support through 2019. I think before I conclude my report, I just wanted to touch on 2020. I'm sure there's a lot of questions about how this is impacting us, because we were building a very strong momentum from 2019 with night market expecting to double at a minimum. And with the COVID measures, we've been quite handcuffed on what we can do with events. So the programs in effect right now are sufficient to cover our costs, and costs have been cut to address the decrease in revenues, and the 2020 budget looks like it will cover itself. So we're in good shape, in case anyone's worried, because I was, and we're good. So that will conclude my treasurer's report.
Thank you very much, Meryl. I'll now turn the floor over to Anna Jones from Church Pickard for presentation of the 2019 financial statements. Take it away, Anna.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So the first part I'll speak about is the Independent Practitioners Review Engagement Report. And it does say to the members in the first paragraph that we have reviewed the accompanying financial statements of the Greater Nanaimo Chamber of Commerce as at December 31st, 2019. It then goes on to speak that management is responsible for the fair presentation of the financial statements, and our responsibility as your external accountant is to express a conclusion on the financial statements based on our review. I'll now go over to the statement of financial position. This year, total assets at the end of December 31st, 2019, $669,853, made up of cash, accounts receivable, prepaid expenses, unrestricted GICs, internally restricted GICs for the building reserve, 24,000, and property and equipment, 483,000. This year there was capital asset additions of just over 8,000 for furniture and equipment and an AC unit, offset by $13,000 of amortization. Then this year there's total liabilities of $143,000, consisting of accounts payable, bursaries and scholarships, deferred revenue, and then you have deferred capital contributions. And what that represents is that the chamber got funds to for the building, and they get recognized into revenue as the building's depreciated. So overall this year there was net assets of $361,000, which is a slight improvement over the prior year. Now I'll go over to the statement of operations. So total revenue, $514,000. Direct expenses, $155,000. So overall, there was a profit of $358,000. And then, as Meryl said, total expenses, $337,000, which is mostly down due to wages and contractor fees. So overall, before capital items, again, there's a surplus of $21,000, offset by amortization expense on capital assets, $13,000. And then recognizing revenue for that deferred capital contribution. So overall, there was excess of revenues over expenses this year of $13,000. So that concludes my report. I just kind of went over in a very high level. If anyone has any specific questions, now's the time to ask me. And I'm also available if you want to call me or email me at the office if you just don't feel comfortable asking questions in this environment. I'm totally open to that, and that's fine with me.
Thank you very much, Anna. I'll now ask for a motion to approve the 2019 financial statements. It's been moved by Meryl Chaley, seconded by Corey Hostetter. Any discussion or questions? Please enter that in the chat box. Here again, there seems to be nothing coming in. So I will ask for the motion, for the poll on the motion. And you have 15 seconds to exercise your vote. Time is up. I would ask for the poll results to be shown. And 100% in favor of approving the financial statements. Thank you very much. Next motion is to approve the appointment of Church Pickard as review accountants for the 2020 year. That's moved by Meryl Chaley, seconded by Nathan Seward. Is there any discussion or questions on approving appointment of Church Pickard? I'm seeing none, so I will ask for the poll. And you have 15 seconds to vote. And I promise next year we'll have Jeopardy music in the background. Time is up. Please close the poll and show results. 100% in favor of appointing Church Pickard going forward. Thank you very much. So that takes care of both Meryl's report and the financial statements and approval of appointment. So I will ask, or now it's time to move to a motion to adopt the Treasurer's report. So moved by Meryl Chaley and seconded by Graham Morey. Any discussion on adopting the Treasurer's report? Show the poll, please. Fifteen seconds and counting. Close the poll, please. 100% in favor of adopting the Treasurer's report. Thank you very much. Now we move on to the CEO's report. So I'm not going to read my report. It's in the document that you've been sent, but what I would like to do was make note of a couple of things, although both Meryl and Shauna have brought forth the successes that we've enjoyed this year, and especially highlighting the commercial street night market, which has helped downtown a tremendous amount. And it's helped, I think, our community in general a tremendous amount in terms of injecting some pride of place into Nanaimo residents. But one of the things I really wanted to bring forward was our increased work in advocacy. We worked to expand our committees and their work this year, especially in the advocacy area. We became a member of the Economic Development Task Force and the Health and Housing Task Force is created by Mayor Krogh and Council. And that's an ongoing bit of work that we're involved in now, hoping to resolve some of the issues around homelessness, social order with the Health and Housing Task Force, and helping also to prepare a visionary strategic plan around economic development for our community. We're all very familiar with some of the challenges that we've had and some of the stops and starts that we've had over the past several years. So we're really taking a look at getting this going on a serious and significant basis. We also pursued the establishment of a new downtown business association. We have been operating as primary advocates for downtown for the last couple of years since dissolution of the DNBIA. And late last year, we started in earnest in organizing the voices downtown to come together as one. We received provincial approval for a new downtown association in April of this year. We're very excited to see that happen. We formed a task force to develop a stronger bond and formalize a working agreement between Nanaimo First Nations and the Chamber. That work was interrupted by COVID-19, unfortunately, but we're going to continue to work towards this. And it's primarily the reason for the theme of our AGM today, and also our webinar on Friday, which would be our regular weekly webinar on COVID and workarounds and how we're doing and sort of checking up on each other. We're going to move to a First Nation celebration. So I'm extremely excited about that, and I look forward to everybody joining us on our end of week webinar Friday at 10 a.m. Marika will have notice out on that later today. Another thing that we did is we authored or co-signed 10 policy resolutions presented to the BC Chamber. This made 2019 a record year for policies introduced by your chamber. So the effectiveness of our strategic plan was largely responsible for what happened in 2019 and continues to guide our work going forward, because the strategic plan was written in such a way that we could modify our work plan dependent on the conditions that we were faced with in the economy and in our community. But there's no getting around the fact that a second year of a team working together was so very productive. And I want to point out that we need to extend gratitude to Emily Tate, Lindsay Innes, Leah Barkovic, Rick Kitzel, and Joanne Doyle, and our night market team especially. The results of these close working relationships has been a continually productive, positive, and satisfying year for the Nanaimo Chamber, and all of us focused on the Chamber's success. I want to thank our team, our volunteer leaders, our board of directors, our committee members, Chamber ambassadors, and every member who has invested their trust in this organization through their membership. This success belongs to all of you. I'll draw your attention to the committee reports following in the annual report, which identifies a little further some of the things we've done. And if anybody wants to give me a call or any of those committee chairs a call to inquire about the work that's going on in the committee, or inquire if you'd like to volunteer on those committees, I invite you to do so. You'll also see a new members report. This is a tradition of our procedures and policies that we always include a new members report, because when you adopt a CEO's report, you're also adopting the fact that those new members have joined us this year. I believe there's 89 on that list. I might be out by 1 or 2, but it's slightly larger than last year's list, which is a good thing. So I think I've given you all a chance to take a look at those reports, and I will now ask for a motion to adopt the CEO report. So moved by Shauna, seconded by Merrill. Is there any discussion or questions on the CEO report?
Kim, it's Meryl. I'm seeing some chatter that the chat function isn't working. It's been disabled. Oh, okay, is it open now?
There's a message from Dirk saying it is now. I'm
Okay.
very sorry. Are there any further concerns about the chat box not being functional to this point? Please mention it or raise a hand or do something, and I will figure out how we will deal with that. And of course, the CEO report is still open for comment, and we have a mover and a seconder. It's free for discussion. We'll leave that open for just a few seconds longer to make sure that we I'm seeing nothing come in, so I will ask for a vote on the motion to adopt the CEO report. I'll leave everybody the 15 seconds, of course. Time is up. Close the vote, please. Thank you very much. Now I'll move to the next motion.
Kim, sorry, there is a question there on the chat. Just so you know.
Okay, it's a question on the nominees for the board prior to the AGM. Those would have been presented at a board meeting in February. It's our process to close nominations 30 days or more in advance of what our intended AGM is. Since our intended AGM was April 15th or thereabouts, we would have brought this forward at the February 26th board meeting. We start to seek nominations to the board back in November of the previous year. The nominations committee is made up of the past chair, the current chair, the vice chair, and the CEO. So I hope that answers your question, Ian. Thank you, sir. Seeing no further questions, and thank you very much for your compliment, Carolyn. Seeing no further questions, I'd like to move to the next motion. It's a motion to adjourn the 2020 AGM. It's so moved by Shauna McPhillips and seconded by Merrill Chaley. Is there any discussion? I'm going to leave that open for a few seconds longer in case there was any late discussion. Nathan is proposing a motion from the floor. Can you bring that motion forward, please, Nathan?
If it's unrelated, we should probably finish this motion.
I think so. Okay, there was no discussion relative to this motion. So there you go. Poll results are 100% in favor. Oh, thank you. Okay. I don't know how we withdraw that motion to adjourn with this late motion to ratify all businesses at the 2020 Chamber AGM, despite the chat function not operating on Zoom. I believe we can just include that. I think that we can include that as a minuted item. Or shall we call a vote? Marika, can you create a...
I'm going to create another poll for you with that question. If you just give me 1 second here.
When ready, I'll move that motion.
That was you, Shauna?
Yep.
Shauna moves. And a seconder, Meryl?
I can second that.
Thank you. Poll is there. Please exercise your vote. Close the poll, please. And results, 100% in favor of Nathan's motion. That's great. Thank you and thanks so much for doing that, Nathan. That's why we pay you the big bucks, buddy. Okay, thank you, everybody. Other than a little scramble at the end there, this would have ended bang on time, and we would have been able to go to our speakers forum right away at 12:30. But as it is, we're here now. I'm not seeing Erilyn on my screen. Erilyn, are you here? Can you do your introduction of Carol Anne Hilton, please, Erilyn? Can we make sure that Erilyn is unmuted? Marika, can you check through and make sure that we've got Erilyn someplace? I see her name appearing on the screen. Oh, is that you, Erilyn?
You can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you very much. If you'd go ahead with your introduction of Carol Anne Hilton, please.
Sure. Thank you, Kim. And thank you, Chamber members, for taking time out of your day today to participate in the AGM for the Nanaimo Chamber of Commerce. And we welcome you into our territory to transact this business here today in the context of a pandemic. So thank you. Nanaimo is very delighted and excited to be working with the Chamber on removing the barriers to entry for First Nations and Indigenous businesses into the economy. And Carol Anne Hilton is one of our leading First Nations advocacy groups through the Indigenomics, but also as an individual. She's done a lot of work for and with First Nations to remove those barriers as a result of the Indian Act and the history between Canada First Nations relations over the last 160 plus years. Carol Anne Hilton is from Nuu-chah-nulth descent from the Hesquit Nation on Vancouver Island. She carries an MBA from in business management from the University of Hertfordshire in England. And she also had a partnership with VIU at that time as well. She is the CEO and founder of the Indigenomics Institute. Carol Anne currently serves on the BC Emerging Economy Task Force as an advisor to the Minister of Jobs, Trades and Technology, as well as on the BC Indigenous Investment Council for the Ministry of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. Carol Anne was appointed as a senior advisor to the Federal Finance Minister, Bill Morneau, on the Canadian Federal Economic Growth Council. Carol Anne has led the establishment of a line of thought called Indigenomics, the building and strengthening of Indigenous economies. Carol Anne is currently authoring Indigenomics, a global power shift. Carol Anne's work has been recognized with an Outstanding Business Achievement Award from the BC Achievement Foundation, a Creating Wealth Award from the National Indigenous Council of Elders, and Business of the Year Award from the New Toronto Economic Development Corporation, and most recently, the Excellence in Aboriginal Relations Award from the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business. Carol Anne currently serves as director on the McGill University Institute of the Study of Canada, the National Canadian Community Economic Development Network, as well as a juror on the National Smart Cities Challenge. Carol Anne is also an instructor at Simon Fraser University's Community Economic Development Program and a faculty lead at the Banff Center's Indigenous Business Program, where she was also a Fleck Fellow. So Carol Anne, we're very happy to have you here today to share your school of thought with the Nanaimo Chamber of Commerce, but also support the Nanaimo Chamber partnership to tune in to the national developments of reconciliation and self-determination for First Nations in Canada. So without further ado, Carol Anne.
Awesome, thank you. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we're able to hear you. We seem to have lost your image on the screen.
That's okay. Awesome. Well, thank you kindly, Erilyn, for the warm introduction, and thank you to the Nanaimo Chamber. I applaud your vision and your leadership right now in this moment in time. Uklasish, Carol Anne Hilton, Heshquiaksupsish. My new channel's name is Wakatush, and I have roots near Tofino in the village of Hot Springs Cove and Howsett. And yes, I spent a good well over 10 years in Nanaimo studying. I did both my undergrad and my master's there. So Nanaimo is a very warm place to my heart, and literally a place that I grew up as a young adult that, you know, the instruction I received at the Vancouver Island University still shapes my thinking and my leadership today as a person. So I was fortunate to spend time with the Chamber earlier this year, which actually feels like a lifetime ago, considering this COVID environment that we're in. Literally, I feel like I'm in a time warp. So realizing again and kind of keeping a little bit of a track on the partnership development between the nation locally with Nanaimo and with your organization. I cannot applaud enough that you are right on time, you're asking the right questions, and your attention to what right now needs is the design and evolution away from just seeing the socioeconomic gap of how First Nations are perceived, and actually the ability to construct positive business relationships. So the more that you as an organization are able to facilitate positive business and economic relationships with the nation and the surrounding region, that's really where the success will be built from. And what is important to me in proposing a partnership is the ability to increase the visibility of the Indigenous economy regionally. What is important to me in seeing this partnership is increasing the visibility of Indigenous entrepreneurship and being able to see it in such a way as to be able to both address its growth and its challenges. And again, the ability to move out of a problem frame of experiencing the Indigenous relationship, of being chronically underfunded, difficulty within the fiscal relationship nationally, and being able to shift out of just a singular problem frame of the perception of working with Indigenous peoples and the difficulty and challenges that we experience from an economic development perspective, and actually establishing collaborative approaches to community economic development. I referred to that concept of moving beyond the socioeconomic gap, where First Nations are consistently seen as falling behind or not keeping up. And it's within that problem framework that the difficulty in perception lies of what can we really do, or, you know, that's not our problem, or that's within the federal relationship, or any other number of perceived responses. But constructing your specific relationship to support business development, to increase that visible increase of Indigenous entrepreneurs, and the ability to establish leadership points in reconciliation. What you are embarking on in this relationship is setting a stake in the ground where symbolically the representation of the history of the relationship, the struggles of colonization, has allowed the evolution of one side of an economic story, whereas the effects of that has largely been experienced through the nation. So that's what Indigenomics is being able to facilitate business development and economy from an Indigenous worldview. So the concept of economics, the concept of Indigenomics, is really about facilitating a collective economic response. So realizing that the inclusion of Indigenous peoples into the development of the region is essential to the forward point of this story. So the reference of a marker point in this relationship begins to be able to facilitate the construct of key principles of collaboration within business and within economy. Indigenomics itself is a platform for modern constructive generative economic design. It's structuring our relationships for economic success. So seeing the construct of an element of a document that reflects your relationship and where you're going and what you want to be able to design going forward is fundamental to that visibility, to inclusion, and to a current environment of economic reconciliation. So I referred to the concept of seeing Indigenous peoples as a fiscal burden, particularly in this environment of a post, well, we're not quite post, but in an emerging COVID economic response, where communities are beginning to establish, how do we do economy different? How do we address these significant industries that have been impacted through COVID? What I am hearing consistently across the nation is that as First Nations are beginning to come out of the initial early crisis or emergency components of keeping their citizens and populations safe, that the next aspect of that is to begin to build this narrative of we're ready to do business. And it's that construct in establishing a relationship that needs to be supported. So as a chamber, I really encourage you to look at the sectors that are represented within your organization. So whether that's tourism, hospitality, transportation, resources, all the full spectrum of sectors, is to ensure that there's Indigenous leadership within each of those sectors and those tables. And as your region forms and shapes an economic response, what is important is to hear the voice of the local nations of saying, this is how it has impacted us. This is what we see as a constructive response. And what's important is that business planning does not occur in silos, that an regional economic and business response needs to be inclusive of the local nation and to be able to bring sectoral leadership and inclusion at all that full level. So in coming to spend time with your chamber today, this is really about locating our leadership today. This is about addressing and increasing the visibility of the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. It's about establishing your relationship with the nation to be able to address economic inequality, and in addressing it, to acknowledge that it has existed across time, and in the future, what is being built is essentially to define what a successful business relationship looks like. The history of Vancouver Island itself is a vast network of trade routes that was all based on the success of economic relationships, and that was embedded within ceremony. So being able to understand that the history of the local nation has always been about establishing successful business and economic relationships. That locating your leadership as an organization is to be able to position yourself beyond the arguments of just the problem alone, of historical inequities or historical injustice, and to bring to the table constructive, generative economic responses. So in order to be able to do that, to see the problem is one aspect, to be able to understand the experience of the nation, but to not restudy what is already being told as a challenge. So many nations across this country refer to a inadequate capital, access to capital. So really, is it the problem is itself is in access, or is the problem a networked environment that believes in Indigenous economic empowerment? Those are two different things. So if we look at the simply as a problem as an access to capital versus actually building a platform that supports Indigenous design, that is Indigenomics. And that's really the intention, is to carefully construct your relationships to support economic and business results. So being able to understand how many Indigenous entrepreneurs there are locally, being able to understand a procurement environment is important. Being able to understand business readiness and the experience of the nation and the experience of entrepreneurs. Those are core conversations that continuously need to be engaged in. I've worked across many municipalities and that are working to establish relationships with nations. And what I've seen is this complete separation of economic strategies. It's when economic strategies can be collaborative and inclusive that real progress is made in the business relationships. So I referred to this concept of locating our leadership as an organization. Being clear on the when are you talking about the problem, when are you talking about the opportunity, and when are you constructing a network of relationships to establish Indigenous economic results. That is all very important to be paying attention to. The other aspect that I encourage you as you embark on this collaborative journey is to pay attention to the questions that you're asking. So I don't know how, over the last 2 years, the types of questions that were asked to say, as a group, the question was asked, what might an MOU look like? What might collaboration look like? And here you are today, where you've better defined what collaboration looks like, but you have a new question. And that action has facilitated a new question. And it's the results of those questions that will drive what the end outcome of collaboration and economic results can look like. So what might it look like to develop and support a network of Indigenous entrepreneurs? How can we bring visibility to Indigenous entrepreneurs within this region? Those types of questions become important to pay attention to, because if you're asking a question that's no longer relevant for the time, that's when you see a lack of action or a lack of results. So the continuous question of what does economic reconciliation need right now? And if it always becomes somebody else's problem, that's where that lack of leadership occurs. So while you have the engagement with each other as parties, this is really what I want to be able to reflect to you is that we are in this power moment, that Indigenous peoples across this country and globally are really claiming a place at the economic table of this country and at the region. What is important to me in this is that there's this realization of the function and role and limitation of the Indian Act itself, that the ability to understand the difficulties in the ability to establish economic process under the Indian Act and how that has held nations back, that's a whole other talk. I don't have time to do that talk today, but there are resources such as, I believe Bob Joseph wrote a book about the essential things you need to know about the Indian Act. I would encourage you to read that, because what becomes important in that is building your understanding and building some historical content that allows you to be able to build your understanding. Another great book that I think you might be interested in is called Indigenomics, Taking a Seat at the Economic Table, which was supposed to have been released on June 3rd, but was postponed now until mid-September. But the concept is really to build awareness and understanding of systemic Indigenous economic exclusion over time, and to be able to build leadership points for Indigenous economic inclusion going forward. So in this COVID environment, I encourage you to really look at who is at the table, whose voices are being heard, and that in constructing an appropriate response for this region and the support of a full spectrum of businesses, that the Nanaimo Nation is central to being able to have a seat at the table, to bring visibility to Indigenous entrepreneurs, and to be able to facilitate that increased visibility of the growth of Indigenous economic strength, its impact, and its outcome in the region. That is a story that you want to tell. When a region can tell this has been the success of a collaborative economic relationship with the nation, that's a story worth telling, and that is Indigenomics. Thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate your leadership, and thank you so much for having me, and I'm happy to come in anytime and speak with your group. I really do applaud your leadership and foresight and vision to Indigenous economic success in your region. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol Anne. I have Sheila Malcolmson ready to make a statement, but I wanted to say thank you from me for both your attendance at our breakfast in January, where you introduced this concept of Indigenomics. It was such an interesting day because we listened to you talk about the theories and the goals and the vision for Indigenomics before walking across the street to the sod turning at the new hotel where the banner was unfurled that indicated that the Nanaimo First Nations were in fact an equity partner in that project. And that's a point of pride for our community, I think. Sheila, could you please step in and
Thank you so much. Greetings to the chamber members. I'm honored to be speaking to you from Nanaimo territory. And I bring greetings from Minister Michelle Mangal. She's a minister now for jobs, economic development, and competitiveness. And she was really happy to get the chamber's invitation and really sorry that she's in another Zoom conference right now, but invite her again. And as a Kootenais person, I think she really gets a lot about what our kind of economy is in Nanaimo, and I'm really glad to see her in the role. Greetings, Erilyn, my Nanaimo friend, and to Chief Wise. Thank you for opening us up so well. And Kim, I always really appreciate you inviting me into these good moments in our community. Carol Anne, thank you for sharing your wisdom of the pathway that you're helping develop to strengthen relations between governments and Indigenous governance and economic development is just medicine and a pathway that we really so badly need. I always love when you give the shout out to VIU. We're of course really proud of it in our region, and especially grateful to you for emphasizing the need to talk as if we have already moved into this new way of doing business together. It's very important. My work is completely informed by trying to raise up and tell the stories of the things that are working well, especially as our media is increasingly diminished. It's just too easy to tell the kind of gotcha stories that fit a stereotype, and so we really need that the good work. And I love Kim making sure that Carol Anne knew what had happened after we heard you last time. It really was great to walk out of this chamber meeting where you were talking about Indigenomics and then walk right into the celebration of the partnership of the Marriott Hotel and Nanaimo. And thanks to the chamber for making that happen. The advocacy for more hotel space in Nanaimo is something that's been long advocated. I know we're in just such a challenging time right now for tourism. We don't know what it's going to look like on the other side, but that was a good day not so long ago. And it's just a great example of how the chamber here in Nanaimo leads and innovates, and how Petroglyph and Nanaimo are innovating and pushing ahead under Chief Wise's leadership. There's just one new development after the next that's being manifested by this new council, and working together with a progressive city council that's inclined to say yes to things. We're really in a very special time in our community. March 6th, there was a really significant signing here in Nanaimo of the First Nations Justice Strategy. It'll be transformational. There's nothing else like it in the country to have First Nations a Justice Council. The chair is former chief here, Doug White III. To have the Attorney General David Eby and the Solicitor General Mike Farnworth all here in Nanaimo at the conference center signing this commitment to work forward and through the issues of murdered and missing Indigenous women, the over-incarceration of First Nations people in the prison system, the spotlight we have right now on police violence, racism in the justice system is all pushed at by that justice strategy. But there's an example of probably a lot of people on the call here didn't even know that that had happened, let alone right in our backyard. So we really need to shine a light on the good work that's happening, and a session like we've had here today really does help that. Nanaimo especially, I'm so honored to be the MLA. We are really generating results in our region about transforming the economy away from resource and into a different sustainable model. Very much challenged by COVID and the big hit that both tourism and service sectors had, but we've got a very strong chamber that's helping us lead the way through that, and a government that wants to work with you and work for people. And the things we're learning here locally about reconciliation, I really firmly believe inform the rest of the province, let alone the rest of Canada, about how to do things differently. So I'm really grateful to serve at this particularly vital time. And I'll just leave with just a couple of words that Minister Mongal asked me to pass on to you. She said, our government's committed to promoting the economic growth of the region and increasing Indigenous participation in the economy. Through the Ministry of Jobs, Economic Development and Competitiveness, the Indigenous Business and Investment Council works with Indigenous industry associations such as Indigenous Tourism BC in support of their members. We also support First Nations businesses such as the Kawatsi Economic Development Corporation here on the island, among others. On that note, I would like to mention the significant impact COVID-19 has had on people and business in BC. Our government is restarting our economy in a carefully planned and safe way through the BC Restart Plan. And I hope members will watch out at, I think it's 1:45 today, Minister James has got a significant announcement on next steps, and you can watch that on any of the BC government social media channels. From Minister Mongal, just to finish, I want you to know that the BC government will continue to be here to support you through this pandemic as we work to get on the path to economic recovery. Thank you so much, Chamber, for the opportunity, and thank you again, Carol Anne Hilton, for showing us a good way forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheila. A question came up during the close of Carol Anne's address, and somebody requesting that we get the names and authors of the books that Carol Anne was mentioning. We'll chase that down this afternoon, and we will post it along with the recording of this session on our website later today. We'll figure out how to do that. Thanks to everyone for taking part in this 130th annual general meeting. It's been an amazing past year, of course, and a puzzling year to come. I'm reminded of the song lyric, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, today is a gift. While I thoroughly prefer strategic planning, I think these lyrics make much more poetic sense in these times. Thank you all for supporting the Nanaimo Chamber. Hayachka.
Kim? Sorry, Shauna, we have a couple of hands up in the attendee list. Judy and Graham, I'm not sure if that's old.
I'm not seeing it.
Hands are down now. Okay.
Okay. It was probably trying to alert us about the chat box. And if anybody has questions about the chat box not functioning in the beginning and they want to bring those to my attention, I'll deal with them appropriately. This wasn't an intent to hide anything or to limit discussion, just a technical glitch as we're all learning how to make these this technology work for us. And we've gone through a lot of practice runs, and it was the one thing I think we didn't check beforehand. But please email me, ceo@nanaimochamber.bc.ca, phone me on my cell, 250-740-0771. Happy to answer any questions or take any follow-up action that's required to make sure that this works for our chamber members. Thank you very much. It's been a great year. Look forward to the next one.